Welcome to another episode of Stewart Squared. We're going to be talking about Cloudflare today because my dad sent me a great podcast with Stratechery or Stratechery.
Stratechery, yeah.
Stratechery. I've been pronouncing it wrong the whole time, but we're both getting very interested in what Cloudflare does exactly, and it was very mysterious. But now I have a much better idea of what they're doing. What's your take on what Cloudflare is doing?
We should mention it's not just Stratechery, but there was an interview. The first one was in, what's it called? Crazy Stupid Tech.
That's
Stupid
right.
Crazy Tech. Yeah, that was Fred Vogelstein. I want to give him credit because that's what cued me up to read Ben Thompson's Stratechery interview. And the pair of them are very interesting. So, I don't totally understand Cloudflare even after having read the two interviews. But the key phrase that he talked about in both, I think, is this thing that they're kind of network administrators versus database administrators. And, computing is, I can't make a global statement, but is made up of computers, wires between the computers, and then data and the network itself. And, there are a bunch of other components that you can get into, but in a distributed network, the database administrator is important because you have to have clean data and it has to be up to date and reliable. The network administrator is a different function. And so it was interesting that Michael Prince said they're the network administrators. And I think they're kind of the only ones that have that mentality. And that's what's led them to have this highly distributed network that like 80% of AI queries, I think is what he said, go through. And I can't quite figure out how they got there and what they did, but they come up with this novel idea of making the crawlers, the AI crawlers that go out and gather all the information, pay for their crawling, and that they would be the intermediaries, very much like being the App Store on iOS, where Apple ended up charging a toll of 30% for every dollar generated, which is now considered a monopoly and monopolistic behavior. That same thing could happen here, I think, if I understand it correctly.
No, I think you're right. And so I just brought up some data on what they do. The core functions, there's 7 core functions according to ChatGPT: a CDN, content delivery network; DDoS protection. That's what they started with. They started giving companies, small websites, DDoS protection for free, and then eventually bootstrapped that into doing much larger deals with corporations to do the same thing, which leads into the next one, which is web application firewall. They built their own DNS service, which was interesting. They realized they had to do that because they were getting attacked by everyone. So they had to actually, there was a huge flaw in it if they if they had to go use someone else's. So they built their own. Zero trust security, not sure what that means. SSL and TLS encryption and load balancing. And then they run a freemium model. Basic protection and performance services are free. And then they do what everyone else does, like GitHub, where all the advanced features they become extremely expensive once you start to actually make money in our functioning company, which is another thing we can talk about is the changing business model for AI. But the interview is interesting because you said about scraping, so they're now. And he really called out Perplexity, saying Perplexity is a bunch of evil bastards who are basically doing a whole bunch of things. One of the best thing I heard from that interview was that they grab if they get blocked from the actual content, from scraping the content, Perplexity, they will take the name and then they'll take a brief description of the content of the article, and then they'll have AI write a fake article about it and then publish that to the internet. And so that's what Perplexity is doing in order to do something.
Careful right there. It's not published to the internet. LLMs are built on data, but the data is not accessible to the internet. Mean? You can't just go look at the data that OpenAI or Perplexity or anybody uses to train their model. That trains the model to parse tokens and
Yeah, it's
sort of
almost
build the response.
it's like
Those are
taking
proprietary.
taking open data. This is the core issue that they're trying to point out. It's taking open, free internet data and then sucking it into a proprietary model, which people
Yeah.
don't have full access to,
And
basically.
actually, what people are objecting to is that they don't just take the open free stuff; they take everything. Right. That's why the New York Times is suing OpenAI, and that's why Anthropic just announced in the last couple of days that they would pay $3,000 per book for to a total of 1.5 billion. They have the cash, so why not get to be friends with the authors?
Well, and there's 10. They made 10, or that was 10% of their recent fundraise was to pay off the settlement for that 3K per book, Anthropic. Let's go into that because they did that in order to not set a precedent, right? Because if that had gone to court, then they would have set a precedent, which then could be used like all
That's
the other
part of the
precedents.
motivation. I mean, from their point of view, $1.5 billion is a drop in the bucket. How much did Anthropic raise? They raised 13 billion, I think it was. They had set out to raise 5, but their revenue was growing so fast that they raised 13, and they could have raised more.
13 billion
The line was
Series
they're
F
catching up to OpenAI. Their scale is catching up to OpenAI.
Yeah, interesting. So both it feels like they're one and number two. So they settled this, so they don't have to go to court and like have a bunch of discovery and everything like that. And so they just paid off the books, and so this just means that it'll keep on going. Then the other big piece of news is that Google is now outside. The Google, basically, the DOJ said it's okay. You guys have competitors now. You've got OpenAI and Anthropic as competitors. So now Google is not a monopoly. That seems pretty big too, right?
Well, and there's a lot of debate about that. Because search is essentially different than chat. So chat answers questions directly rather than piling up a bunch of links. And that algorithm that they use, I'll forget the name of it, but where they use the number of references back to a piece of data to rank its importance. That's it, PageRank. That's what it's called. That basic thing that they have a patent on was the secret to their dominance. And I think Judge Mehta actually made a mistake. It's a legitimate mistake because nobody really knows what's going on. This is what we keep talking about. It's like nobody really understands what's going on. Judge, tech people, nobody really understands. So the judge sitting there doing his best to try to figure it out and comes to a conclusion. And he had originally set it up that, he might say that they had to spin off Chrome or that they had to publish all search data, that there were a number of remedies that could have been pretty severe and really affected Google's business. So the judge decided that all of this AI stuff is competitive to Google's inherent thing, but the fact that they are embedded in it in the Safari browser and pay Apple tons of money for that means that they can stick the Gemini in as the producer of the search result, which seems to be an unfair advantage, but to me, but who am I to talk?
Was all this confusion apparent in the early 90s? In 94, was there a similar level of confusion when the internet was coming around about like, what does this mean?
No, there was not one thing that everybody was doing. Everybody had a different approach to doing search. And the first attempts tried to categorize all data, right? So they would use a tree of an ontology to produce search results, which was inherently slow. So Google did something different, and it took off so fast that it took forever for other people to figure it out, and they had incredibly well-protected technology. They had the patents on, and then they kept developing it. And so there was never really a strong competitor to PageRank, to Google. You mentioned before we started here Alta Vista, which was a early search engine developed at Digital Equipment Corp. And then there was Yahoo, and there were others. And so, but with AI, everybody figured it out at the same time. And it started with the Transformer paper, which was a Google research project. But it was published, and everybody's going like, "Oh, look at this." So then a bunch of wickedly smart people, the 150 people that are in San Francisco that know what's going on, they all figured out how to do it. Slight differences, but it's basically the same thing. So this is much different than when at least search got started. There's a bunch of other.
Well, from what I got, because it's an interesting, it was an interesting tangent you went on there, because I was asking about the commercialization of the internet 1994 and how the commercialization met the legal and regulatory bodies and whether they knew what was going on with the internet. But you just gave a really good insight, because that led to search. That eventually led to commercialization.
Search was a secondary effect. And because originally the ARPANET, the original internet, was set up between academic institutions, universities, and research labs. So the people that were within there could message each other and have a common way to look at documents, and which led to all the protocols, TCP/IP and HTTPS, so on and so forth. And that process of going from an academic, non-commercial internet happened very loosely. It was like really hard to figure out what was going on at the time, but between kind of 94 and 96 it happened. And it was Wild West, because nobody had control over it. And people claimed their own domain names. There was no domain registrar. There was no sort of formal body that made sure that the protocols were standardized. And then it just became something. Everybody built web pages and started selling stuff over the internet and all the other services that exist now. So the search phenomenon was a secondary evolution.
But then the regulation of it, we've talked about it a few weeks ago, where the regulation of it, did the regulators, it seemed like they were pretty smart about what happened, because it seems like they did the right thing. And it doesn't seem like they're going to do the right thing with AI.
No, and remember the political environment in the 90s versus the political environment in the 20s. Now, because there's all this other stuff going on, you can't really believe the U.S. government, as it's currently managed, is going to do the right thing. They don't seem to be doing the right thing, like in health, not even really in defense and other domains. But back in the 90s, when it was happening, Al Gore leading the charge, who didn't actually invent the internet, but let that slip at some point. The whole idea was that this is a resource, a treasure that shouldn't be regulated.
Yeah.
Your question?
Why did Al Gore make that comment? That
he was getting enthusiastic and kind of just made up a statement. I don't take it away from him. He's got a big ego.
But was he
recently? So
Al Gore's role as a U.S. congressman, and later senator in the 1980s and 1990s, he strongly supported government funding for network infrastructure. He pushed the High Performance Computing and Communication Acts of 1991, sometimes called the Gore Bill, which allocated resources that expanded the NSFNET backbone.
Now, let me just give you a little highlight. Gore's father was the guy who led the charge about the interstate highway system. Right, the U.S. has this incredible federal funded highway system that connects the whole country together, so you can drive all over the place for free. And his dad was the one that set the tax that funded that.
That's really interesting, because that's like the internet, and I'm sure that there was a metaphor there in the 90s. I'm pretty sure that Bill Gates himself used the information
superhighway. That was people who didn't know what the hell they were talking about. That was people were searching for a way to describe this thing. But I think I've told you that there was a great AT&T video, I wish I could find it, where they did man on the street interviews in New York. when people they go like, do you know what the information superhighway is? And they go, yeah, I think you can get there like across town on 85th. It's like, I have no idea what they're talking about, but AT&T knew why they were asking those questions.
And this leads to something I've been thinking a lot about, particularly down in here in Argentina. 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago now, when ChatGPT 3.5 came out, I immediately saw the value. It's not crazy that somebody like me would see it. Been in San Francisco, or I was in San Francisco a long time. I've played with technology for a long time. It makes sense that you'd get into it, and then I just kind of expected, seeing so many waves we've gone through with technology, that normal people would be like, oh, this is really, really big. This is really important. And I mean, kind of happened with ChatGPT. Like, you got 200, 300 million people, but most people don't seem to be paying much attention to it. And if they are, then they've got these crazy fantasies about it being a killer robot and stuff like that. Yeah.
I don't go along with that. I had this, I can't remember if I talked about this, but I had this thing called the concentric circle theory, which is,
you did.
The very small part of it, the people that actually know what's going on are doing it. And then succeeding circles have less and less knowledge of and involvement in it, but are affected by it. And so if you take the average American, 330 million people, whatever it is, a relatively small percentage of them really understand what is going on. And then there's a much bigger one that are like going, well, this is like a big deal, but I have no idea what it is, whatever. But wait until it really affects them without their activity. But the phenomenon is that now we have 8 billion people in the world, and there's a fair percentage of them that are paying attention, which is why ChatGPT is now up to 800 billion. But that's a false statistic, because they do average monthly average users, and that's bullshit. Anybody who's just using it once a month is not actually using it. The daily active users is the key number, and that's not publicized.
Interesting. So they only publish the monthly active users. That's where the big number comes from.
So Anthropic has 500. I don't know what the numbers are, but Anthropic's getting closer to OpenAI. It's going faster than OpenAI, but it's monthly active users, and people have used this all the time. That's fine if you're publishing a magazine or doing most of the stuff, but like Facebook is all about DAUs. Facebook lives and breathes daily active users, which is still pretty high, even though, of course, I wrote about it tailing off. But so in a real-time, high-speed network, what really matters is daily active users. Those are the people that are like really using it every day.
Yeah. That goes back to the high-speed, the network administrators, and that really seems to be that once the cloud got off, then because it goes back to ARPA. It goes back because ARPA was that initial basic network, and then I'm sure it went much more into barely connecting databases together with networks. And then search came along, and search all of a sudden needed a bunch of network and database guys. And then the cloud came along, and that's where the network guys became really important, right?
So Google built its own networks. Twitch did too. This is not an unusual phenomenon. But,
interesting.
If you're on the leading edge, you can't buy stuff from other people. You have to do it yourself. Twitch had to do it because it was live streaming, so it was a different architecture than most of the internet. But Google built its own, so they built their own servers. They have a huge business building their own servers before AI, before ChatGPT. Their infrastructure is worldwide, so, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of servers and data centers connected all over the world, so that when you do search, big result comes right back. AI has a different architecture, so it's kind of where the Cloudflare comment comes in. It's like Google is really good at database management, and they sort of built the network, the connections between their database to be high speed, but they built it around the database. And
Mm.
um,
Mm.
and really what Cloudflare is saying is that once you've built an LLM and you deploy it, ChatGPT 4.0, GPT 5.0, whatever it is, Claude 3.2, every time they deploy a new one, the way that results get generated for the users is different than the way it is in search. So you could say it's not just Google's business model, but its fundamental architecture is not optimized for AI. This is getting into an area where I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of skating here.
Well, and it seems like nor is the internet too. And this is that podcast was so interesting to me because it kind of made what is the internet. Google set the precedent that anybody could scrape the internet for free, and they did that in order to have their business model of ads work out because they were scraping the internet so that they could map out the internet so that they could send people to content creators and then have the content creators pay Google. But that's dying because the AI search crawlers and, Anthropic, links out to a content creator 1 out of every 90,000 searches. Whereas Google, it's something 1 out of every 4 back in the day. And also in that podcast, it showed that over the past 10 years, it's been harder and harder and harder for content creators to get 1 click. So this was already happening before the LLM showed up. Now the LLMs are showing up, and it feels like it's the internet itself is an existential is in an existential time where it's like it could drastically shift over the next 5 years due to where the LLMs are going. It will.
No, it's not a could. It will. It's like we just don't know exactly how it will do it.
Yeah.
But that's why everybody's all head up about it because it will change. The way traffic rolls across the internet, the way that people query it and understand it. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. And, Google's very savvy for sticking Gemini in the search results. You can see the links below it, but you get this one and it tells you exactly what you need. You don't need to go anywhere else. So, I force myself to use Perplexity for current events. So, I'm kind of knowing what I'm supposed to be doing. I went to Berlin. I'm just on my way back from Berlin. And I knew there was Uber in Berlin, but there's Free Now in Dublin. And so Free Now, turns out, was bought by Lyft in July. So now it's Uber and Lyft in Europe. And there's some other little ones. And so I asked Gemini through the browser, Uber versus Lyft in Berlin. And it came back, gave me a detailed thing. It said Free Now is a collection of taxis, and they have access to the official taxi people, and Uber are private for hire cars, so they're more expensive. But there might be more of them available when there's a lot of demand. It gave me a really precise, so I knew exactly what to do. That's of course I did that in Gemini, not Perplexity, but.
Well, but that's what Matthew Prince was saying in this interview is that UI, the UX works far better than you going in and clicking into someone else's web page, which means that the whole business model of our internet since 2001 is at threat. And what you did just now, that's right now. But if the content creators, particularly the local content creators, are not incentivized in order to actually create content anymore, then, at some point it dries up unless there's some sort of market that's established where we can essentially pay content creators. And this goes and he made the article or the metaphor of the Medicis. That the Medicis were, and this isn't in the interview, this is just what I've been researching, the original bankers of Europe, they built up information networks. The original newsletters all came from Italian Renaissance bankers to try to figure out what was going on in Hamburg or Paris, all these different things. And they built up information networks. And those were the first newsletters that came out. And then something really interesting I learned from a mutual contact of ours who was a big gaming magazine guy in the 90s said that the ads inside of a magazine were actually great because the ads were content, because somebody who's buying a magazine already has that relevancy. If you go out and buy a magazine, it means that you know what you're getting, and so you want to see certain ads, and the ads can provide it. It sounds like a utopia
Well,
from the
not
90s.
quite,
Yeah.
but this what you're referring to is what was known as the special interest magazines. The readership magazines was defined by the area of coverage in the magazine. And this happened before the personal computer, but it was pretty natural for computers and software. So you know that I worked for Inc. magazine, but I worked for it and they were called United Marine Publishing because they had 3 magazines, one for sailing, one for motorboating, and another one for the trade. And I ran the trade magazine. And we were a part of that phenomenon. In fact, Bernie Goldhurst is the founder of that company, was sometimes credited with creating a special interest magazine because he started Sail magazine just about sailing, and the big magazine in the area of boating was motorboating and sailing, covered both. And people that have powerboats don't like people that sail, and people who sail don't like. So Bernie split off the sail part, and so then it would go down the path of, well, how specialized can it be, and how do you balance like the amount of money you can make out of that special area and provide serious information. But and you're talking about Pat, I think, but in the computer business, there was as much information in the ads as there was in the editorial. And so people would announce new products, and you look at the magazine and you'd see what the new products are. When it started focusing on the Mac or the PC, it got more specialized, or games, or people were buying them. The ads were just as relevant as the editorial.
So, in that's almost, it feels like almost like a proto-internet, because most of the people who were early on the internet were like, I love this internet because I can find people who share my niche interests, and I can find people around the world who share this particular niche interest of mine that I can't find anywhere in my local town or even in my big city. And so this idea that you could go in and find a newspaper or magazine, but that was one direction. So they were broadcasting that media information through the net, and what the internet did is allowed for a one-to-one connection where both people could participate in that community, and you could actually establish a relationship rather than just mutually reading the same magazine. But conferences kind of did that.
Different dynamic. You said conferences?
Yeah, conferences served as the early internet before the internet, because that's how if you go to a conference, but how would you find out about the conference?
You have to get on an airplane to do it. So
yeah,
that's a lot of friction. Particularly, you have to remember airplanes. I'm in Newark, and I just went through customs, and I'm in the global entry. So I stand in front of a machine that recognizes me and just walk through. I don't even have to show my passport anymore. And it's pretty interesting, that information system, that it can do that for, all the 300 plus million American citizens. Well, you have to sign up for global entry, but, they're actually TSA is doing it now. So everybody's, being recognized by their face. So the big database out there that associates your face with your passport and citizenship.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive, actually.
But the conferences, how do we get there from the conferences? You were just traveling around. How did that relate?
Before one of the conferences I went to when I started out, before even the computer got involved with the computer, before I went to Inc., was the Magazine Publishers Association annual conference, magazine industry conference. And you get to go and, you could sit there and listen to the editors of big magazines and publishers, and, everybody talk to each other too. There have been conferences forever. That's not a new phenomenon. And I wouldn't go as far as saying that was the old internet. The internet enabled new activities that were not possible previously.
Because of what? What about it?
Because what you were just talking about is two-way communication.
Yeah.
You can go in both directions. There's this underlying concept in computing networks, really, about synchronous and asynchronous. Right? A lot of the internet now is highly synchronized. And I've mentioned this before, that Facebook can determine that a post should be shared in X number of feeds instantly. So you make your post and boom, it shows up everywhere it should, but not where it shouldn't. And that's really critical technology in that. That is the basis for Facebook's success. Facebook's success because real-time updates in the newsfeed were, and Twitter, likewise, and the other social media were all based on very fast real-time synchronization. For small pieces of data, now Netflix is, streaming very large pieces of data, right? Whole movies, and doing it what appears to be simultaneously.
So, yeah, okay, this is giving me really good insight into the Cloudflare issue and this changing internet that we're going through. Because for video, that's not going to change. The video, that synchronous video infrastructure, that's not going to change from. It's only like text based. It's only the text, right?
Yeah. But people are trying to figure out, besides streaming TV shows and movies, right, which are linear, you start at one point, you watch through to the end, and there are millions of people doing it all at once. That's one thing. People are trying to figure out, and it's actually core to what we're doing with the new fund, that there's new kinds of media that are enabled by having video not just be 30 minutes long or 60 minutes long or whatever. It's like it can be mixed, and it's a lot about what's going on with AR and VR. And geolocation and all of the elements of the internet that can be deployed at high speed. So, but nobody can tell you what effect that's going to have on media. Just know that it's gonna. Right? The movie business is going to change. And I've seen a bunch of people pitch this, the idea that you can interact with other people while you're watching video, right? That you can have like group watching, which doesn't really work because it requires kind of scheduling that people don't normally do.
Yeah.
Like on Substack, people publish a video interview and they say, here it is. It starts at 4:00. And they say that at 3:50. How many people are like watching in the 10 minutes before it starts to actually watch it live? But then it's recorded and you can watch it. Anyway, so there's a range of possibilities that happen if the entire internet is real-time and synchronous.
Well, and it sounds like we're talking about two different internets, because there's an internet where I go and I search for something. I want some information. I want to answer some question that I have. That's traditionally done by Google, and now it's being done by LLMs. But then the other part of the internet we were just talking about was I want to be entertained. I want to do something. I want to be immersed in this experience, and that internet feels like it's going to expand. And so we already have Netflix that does that. We have YouTube that does that. We're going to have some crazy. I've been playing around with 3JS because now I can vibe code 3JS stuff in the browser, so I can build 3D worlds inside of the browser. And the fact that the browser can do that is kind of crazy. But then we have the VR and the AR happening at some point. And it sounds like that internet is not at all at threat, but the monetization, the search of it, finding that becomes difficult. Then it feels like we're headed to a world where it's like word of mouth is the only way that things spread. It already is, but
it's been
what do you think?
Forever.
Yeah.
The internet. No. So a business that I tried to start to prove that VCs shouldn't start businesses is because I couldn't find an entrepreneur who agreed. But the
store, right?
Well, no, the store is one thing, but I've had a variety of crazy ideas. But there used to be a thing called TV Guide. And because there were like 7 channels, TV Guides could show you in columns, 7 columns across a page, what was being shown at any particular time. And now the problem is you have to know where it's being streamed before you can watch it. And there's no TV Guide for that. And that problem has actually still not been solved. And I've gotten a couple of pitches recently for people that, and I saw that don't solve that fundamental problem, but are doing something else and claim that this is the way everybody's going to watch video in the future. And I haven't bought that deal yet, but somebody's going to figure out how to help you find what you want. Apple TV is trying. If you open an Apple TV and you search for a show, it will default to Apple TV, but then it will show you if they don't have it on other streaming networks. And I have all Apple TV. And Amazon's trying to do that by having channels from other streamers. So they all know that this issue exists, and they're all trying to position themselves as a solution to the problem. But that's not a technology problem.
Yeah, it's a human attention problem. And then there's the other problem, which is the Cloudflare started with the original intention of stopping, which is the spam problem. And it was really funny in the interview because both of them disagreed on whether the spam problem had been solved. I definitely don't think the spam problem has been solved because everybody's attention. I get like 15 messages on Telegram, WhatsApp. I'm in this philosophy group that just got a spammer in there. And it's just like the Italian Renaissance fortifications are not working. Nothing's working against the spam. And that's just causing this like malaise on people's attention where this internet we did win the battle
it's teaching everybody not to trust anything.
Yeah.
You can't trust anything. You have to start, which is actually kind of healthy and used to be what you had to do anyway, right? You used to get people to call you up and try to sell you shit or knock on your door. That's kind of a natural human thing, try to make money as easy as possible. And spam was a pretty easy way to make money.
That's an interesting thing you just angled there, some bait there about what was it like in the 1970s and the 1980s with door-to-door salesmen? Was it spam?
Well, it depends how you define spam, but if some guy knocks on your door and tries to sell you a vacuum cleaner, and you don't have any interest in the vacuum cleaner, I guess that would be spam, because spam means unwanted commercial information. But that, it depends what decade you're talking about, because once TV happened, then we had advertising. And now, on some level, TV advertising kind of killed the door-to-door sales business.
Yeah.
Interesting. You think about Tupperware. Tupperware created this system of having parties in people's houses to talk about Tupperware and how it could be used. It's hard for us to imagine anybody would be interested in that, but and host people in their own living room. It's actually referred to as multi-level marketing now, but it's considered kind of spam.
Yeah. So let's actually let's take another 5 or 10 minutes and talk about the future of the internet. Do you think the future of what we're talking about is going to look more like the past, like the one we just talked about of like 1950s or 1910s, maybe before radio? Or do you think it's going to be something completely different? Do you think it's going to be a remix of the past? Or do you think the LLMs and all the other transformative tech is going to just create something none of us have ever thought of before?
I'm not sure I can say it correctly, but there's a thing out there, meme, I guess, but it happened before the internet, which is that science fiction predicts what's going to happen about 17 years before it actually does. The 17's in my head, but I'm not totally sure that's correct. So you can go back and look through science fiction and find stuff that happened later that actually did happen. And it was science fiction when it was written, but then, the obvious one for me, given my age, is you can talk to your watch now. What's his? Dick Tracy.
No, I know.
Dick Tracy would talk to his watch. This is in the 1950s. And people were going like, oh, that's really cool. It never happened. Now you can talk to your watch. And your watch talks to you and tells you a bunch of all this stuff. So there is a role that imagination plays in how technology develops and how it's used, what the user experience is. So it's probably true that everything is already visible. We just don't know what the mixtape is, how it'll actually work. I don't know. So, it argues that there won't really be anything new. The idea that you can talk to computers, that's been around for decades, just didn't work very well. Now you can use natural language. how you implement voice in that environment is really pretty interesting, because they now have, I could be talking to you and you're speaking Japanese and I'm speaking English. And when you hear it, it's in Japanese. And when I hear you, it's in English. Right? That's instant translation in real time. And wow, that's going to like change a whole lot of things. What is language if you don't need to learn any?
But the strangest thing I think I would say is that the actual internet was this sci-fi thing that none of the sci-fi authors, I mean, they kind of got the internet, but they didn't really get the internet and now that's a threat, basically. The business model of the internet is a threat. There's all these other crazy technology. It's like it's not the same thing as technology. Internet doesn't equal technology, but it's such a foundational part of technology and of the way our society is run now. That it's like this idea that it's going to go away is in the current form, and to turn into something like that feels like it's going to be pretty different. Like whatever comes next is going to be pretty weird. Like it just doesn't go away, right? Like it's a fundamental networked behavior.
Watch Star Wars or Star Trek recently?
Yeah. No.
Right. Flying around in spaceships that are powered by some mysterious thing, and that can last for years, tens of years, decades. I mean, compare that to Elon Musk's dream of going to Mars. You kind of got to believe that stuff's going to happen. And that there'll be regular transfers from Earth to the Moon, and it's all la la right now because we can't really tell. But he just got SpaceX just got approval to do 190 launches a year.
Wow.
It's 190 from their Florida facility. But they already have approval to fly Starship like 50 times a year from Boca Chica in Texas. And they're having a hard time getting it to fly. So, they're obviously planning on. That's a whole different way of thinking about going to space. So you just thread that out and go, now, that's a different technology than the internet. The internet doesn't work as well in space. It does between satellites. They use lasers and stuff like that. But there's a big problem with instant communications between planets.
Yeah.
They're so far away from each other.
And that'll just bring us right back to batch processing. Well, I think we'll do a short one today because I am not on my game today. But thank you so much for joining us, and tune in next week.